Are you feeling overwhelmed and uncertain about how to scale your business sustainably? Do you have big dreams for your business, but you're struggling to turn them into reality? Or maybe you're just tired of sacrificing your health, your well being, time with your family, and your own self care all in the pursuit of success. Not only is this not sustainable, but it can lead to increased stress and decreased productivity in the long run. Don't let the chaos of running a business hold you back any longer. Join our 12-month Real Women, Real Business Mastery program and start building the business of your dreams with clarity and confidence. If you're ready to achieve six-figure plus revenue growth, rediscover your passion for your business, and say goodbye to overwork, then let's chat. Book a free business planning session at aboutshaunalynn.com/plan. Check out the link in the show notes. Hello and welcome to the Real Women, Real Business podcast. I am your host, Shauna Lynn Simon, and today we have a very special guest. I am super excited to have Cheryl Pinto joining us. Cheryl has been an absolute rock star in the finance world. She actually retired financially free at the age of 33. I mean, I can't even imagine what that feels like. We're going to dive into, how she did that. But one of the things that we want to be talking about here is about helping women to achieve their own financial freedom and to take control of their finances, because she looks at it as being very much related to self-care. And of course, we're all about self-care on the Real Women, Real Business podcast here. So I love that whole idea. I'm not going to get too far into it, but I just want to say how excited I have been about this episode. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Cheryl. Cheryl, welcome.
Thank you, Shauna Lynn. I am so happy and so excited to be here.
I have been so looking forward to this. So I don't think I'm going to do justice to your story. And that's why I gave kind of a briefer introduction on this, because I really want you to tell your story, because you've traveled around the world. You've done a lot of really exciting things, and you started quite young as well. And I think that's really inspiring. So tell us a little bit about what's led you to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. So it's a very long story, so I'm wondering how to piece this together.
I mean, as condensed as we can possibly get it. Yeah.
Right. So I did start working very early, like you pointed out, when I was 16. And soon I started to realize that making money was pretty important. And I focused on that like a mad woman. I started to see that money is important for everything in life. And without money, people are very unhappy, at least in my surroundings. So I came from a pretty middle-class family where I remember my first memory of money was when I was 4 years old and I wanted a boat that had a motor, and we could use it in the bathtub. And I thought that was so cool. And I really wanted it. I was 4 years old, maybe 3 or 4. And I remember the store. I remember the floor of the store because my parents said no. And I was rolling on the floor crying. I really wanted that boat. That was my first ever memory of money. And my parents said, we don't have enough money to buy that boat. And I said, I want the boat. And somehow I picked up the message that it's important to have money or you can't buy the things that you like. So, as kids, we just pick up things and we don't really know how it affects and impacts us as we move along. But that's the impression that it led me to have. And as I grew up in life, I said, I want to start making money very early. My father couldn't understand that because in our cultures, generally, we don't work that early. And he said, I'm providing for you. And I said, yes, but I want to make my own money. And I started working at the age of 16, doing odd jobs, and then got into a bank. And I was like, this was the happiest day of my life. I was 18 and I had a job in a bank,
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and I worked really hard and people noticed it, and I just kept getting promoted. Every average, if I look at my run rate, if you call it that, in terms of cricket terminology, I was getting promoted every 2.5 years. And eventually, I remember my turning point came at this place where I was working with my mentor at work, who I really respected. And he was really making really good money. So I'm saying maybe $40,000 a month. And I remember we were on a business trip and we were traveling to visit some clients. And I asked him, so, hey, you're close to retirement, you're going to retire in 2 years. What are you going to do? Aren't you excited? And he said, yeah, Cheryl, you know what I'm going to do? I said, what? He said, I have this big place back home. He's from the US. When I go back to the US, so this was in Dubai, by the way. I was raised and, brought up in Dubai. And he says, I'm going to go back to the US and I have this really huge backyard. I was like, okay, I think he said he's somewhere in Texas.
Okay.
And I said, okay, what are you going to do? He said, I'm going to go to the backyard and I'm thinking, oh, he's probably going to get a drink and just relax at a fire or something. And he says, I'm going to make a big, huge pile of all my suits, my business suits. And then I said, yes. And he said, I'm going to set them on fire.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Sure.
And I was stunned. I said, why would you do that? And he said, because I just hate wearing them and I hate doing this whole job business thing. And I said, so then why don't you just quit? Why are you stuck in this place for another 2 years? Just quit now. Why are you so miserable? And he said, Cheryl, I have 5 mortgages and $100,000 in my kids' tuition. I can't.
Mm.
And goodness, that's when I said, I don't want to be stuck. I don't want to be in that place. I don't want to be 60 and saying I want to get out. What do I do? And I could ask him that because we were really like, I could trust him and he was my mentor, although he was helping me at work, but he really had my best interest at heart. And then he said, you need to then, set aside the FU fund. I said, what's the FU fund? When you can say FU to your employer and leave.
Yes.
And I was like, wow, that was my light bulb moment. And I said, I don't want to be trapped to any need or have to make money. No, I don't want that. I just decided I don't want that. And I started to relook at all my finances. Then the journey began, which is, changing everything, redoing everything, getting out of debt. I had debt of maybe 300,000 US dollars.
Oh, wow.
Worked towards getting out of it, started investing, planning. It was a journey. And then when I was 33, I knew that this is it. Like, I'm gonna get out. So
Wow.
that's in a nutshell, 33 years of my life. Yeah, that's the story.
That is really interesting and really powerful. I mean, you were so fortunate to have a mentor like that and to get such incredible knowledge at such a young age to be able to position yourself that way. I know a lot of our listeners are, a lot of female entrepreneurs, especially, often are starting later in life. This is something that, they've worked in the corporate world for a number of years. They got tired of putting all of their efforts in for someone else's business. So they've gone out and ventured onto their own. And what I often seen is a lot of my clients, they're in their 40s, 50s, some of them in their 60s, and they've essentially drained their bank accounts to start these businesses. And they're starting over late in life. And now they're looking at, well, I want to retire at some point, like ideally at some point. So definitely not at 33 because they've already, that ship's already sailed basically. But, they're looking at potentially debts that they've incurred, even if it's related to assets, mortgages and cars and whatnot. But also I'm sure, a lot of people these days have credit card debt, have loans that they need to pay back. Maybe they took out loans for starting their business. So for someone like that, what is the best starting point for them? Like, how do they, because I mean, they're probably looking at it right now and saying, like, I don't know how I would even put $10 aside. How do they figure out, like, what's the starting point, I guess?
That's an amazing question. And I absolutely see how what I did, yes, of course, I was 33 back then, but what I did is repeatable. So it's not that it stopped there and I can't do it again. Anyone can do
Sure.
this, right? So it doesn't matter if they're starting at 50, they can still do it. And the way that I see it, I was thinking about it. I always like to think in steps because I see that that's how it really helps people process it and like a roadmap, if you will. So I see the first step would be to get educated because that's what I did. When he told me you need to have money working for you so you can leave, I just said, what does that look like? What does that even mean? And how does money
Mm-hmm.
work for you? I didn't have any knowledge. While I worked in a bank, I was in something called corporate finance. I was financing companies, not really my own money. And I never knew anything about investing. So the first thing I did was to learn about personal finance. And I think that whoever is listening to this, wherever they are, they need to understand money. And when I say that, so since we are mostly women here, there's a lot of baggage that comes with being women and managing money. We need to know that. We need to address it first and foremost, right out of the
Right.
gate. What's going on with the baggage around money? What's going on with the upbringing, religion, parenting? There's so many things that impact how we work around money. So the first thing would be like the whole mindset piece around money is critical, especially for women. More so for
Mm-hmm.
women. I worked with both men and women, so I know the difference. Women need to get like a grip on the mindset around money and understand it's not bad and understand that taking care of your money is not selfish. It's actually self-care. And when we are able to get our finances in order, we can serve our families and loved ones so much better. So this is the critical first piece that I would say, getting the mindset, the whole home in order, the way that we
Mhm.
perceive money. And once we get that, then the education, it's like it goes hand in glove. And the next step that I can see is really knowing, what does pay yourself first mean? Because this is something that women do not do. They pay
Yeah.
themselves last, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah. Yep.
so just understanding, what does that mean? And most of my clients would think, pay myself first. Does it mean that when I get paid, I go and buy myself a nice watch? No, that's not what pay yourself first means. Because of this whole retail therapy thing that's going on in the world, we
Yes.
kind of lose track of what actually pay yourself first means. It means you take aside money and put it in a savings account or invest that money. And that means that that money then will work towards your retirement. So, yes, the goal is you want to make sure that you are taken care of when you retire, then you got to start today.
Right.
Well, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, second best time now. So,
Of
no matter
course.
where your audience is who's listening to this, they need to start now. And that's the second part. So, first, learn how the whole money aspect works, the mindset, the skill set around it, and then start paying yourself. And the third and final piece is getting a grip on money because it's numbers. Everybody's scared of numbers. I was terrified of numbers. I have no clue
Sure.
about numbers. My mom used to, I can't say that on camera, what she used to do when I was not doing well at math. So,
Okay. Yeah. We can
but
use
I
our
was
imagination.
terrible at math in school. All right. But you don't need math to learn how money works because you have Google Sheets and Excel sheets and calculators,
Sure.
and apps. So money is, yes, it's related to numbers, but you don't need to be good at numbers. I'm your test
Right.
when you say
Right.
that. And so just setting a budget, like it's a bad B word, but you got to figure that out. You don't want to call it a budget.
Mhm.
Like some of my clients hate that word, so we call it plan. Okay, we call it a plan for
Right.
your freedom. So we got to
Okay.
fix the plan. And then you got to be able to look at your numbers and see, are you meeting the plan? You're not meeting the plan. That's the audit. And if it works, if it's working, great. If it's not, we start tweaking it. But you got to get these three pieces together: the education, pay yourself, that mentality, and finally just tracking what's happening with your money instead of thinking, oh, I hope I have enough money at the end of the month to pay the bills. I hope
Yeah.
there's enough. No, it has to be planned before. Yeah. So I think that's pretty much it. Like in a nutshell, if I had to say how I did it, that's how I did it. Does
Yeah.
that make
And
sense?
it definitely makes sense. Yeah. I think it's challenging though, especially for female entrepreneurs, because ultimately, we don't necessarily know where our next paycheck's coming from, right? When you're an entrepreneur, you don't necessarily know how much money you can't, it's as much as we try to plan and forecast and predict, it's not the most stable at times or predictable. So I think that's what really, going back to your mindset, I think that's what makes a lot of female entrepreneurs very nervous, is saying, well, if I take this money out now, it's that scarcity mindset. I don't know if there's going to be more coming in. And I definitely know that a lot of my clients, it's the general answer is, well, in order to be able to put money aside, I just have to make a lot more money. Then they make more money, but their expenses have gone up, and now they're still not paying themselves. So it can be a bit challenging. So how do you help someone fix that mindset?
Good question. And a lot of people I work with, and me included, I don't have a fixed income anymore. I've been an entrepreneur since 2017. So I totally get it, And
Hmm.
how do I do it? It means it doesn't matter if you make $10 or $10,000. 10% of that you put aside. So it's irrelevant how much money you make.
You make it sound so simple. I love it. It's so simple. Obviously, just put it aside. Come on, just
Yeah.
do it.
And yeah, so start with 10% and eventually get to 20% and slowly grow, move it upward. You said it, Shauna Lynn, which is that people think, oh, when I have more money, then I'll save. But it never happens because when you have more money, then you
Mhm.
have more expenses. That's it.
Exactly. It's a never-ending cycle. It's
It's a
so
never-ending
difficult.
cycle.
Yeah. I remember back when I was working in the corporate world, it was easy to start saving. I had, X number of dollars that I made every week. And I think I started off putting $10 a week aside and then bumped that up to 25 and then bumped it up to 50. And I think in the end, I was up to about $200 a week that I was putting aside. And, of course, during this time, I received raises. And when I would receive a raise, I'm like, well, I don't need any more money necessarily. So I'm going to put more into my savings. That's how I managed to buy my house, like it was, and it worked really, really well. when I started my business, I'll admit, even for myself, I've been a little all over the place. Like I have a certain amount of money that I would like to put into investments on a monthly basis. So I put a certain amount of money aside weekly into a savings account. And then I think it's about every 2 months that I have a little reminder pop up and it says to throw it into my investments and spread it around wherever I need to. But I'll admit that there are some months where I'm like, I don't think I'm going to do it this month. It's really easy for me to skip it. I never skipped it in the corporate world, but now that I'm in this world, there's definitely, and I'll admit, I've pulled money out of those investments as well. And that's the other thing I think that is challenging of like to keep it in there. And I'll admit, I've been guilty of it as well of like, oh, but I need some money, so I'm just going to take it out of my investments. And I know that's not a great idea. So how do you help someone, yeah, getting that mindset though, to really like
Yeah, those are really important questions because as business owners, we are responsible to run our business. So
Mhm.
I wouldn't beat anyone over the head for taking out money from their investments. Honestly, Shauna Lynn, the end of the reason that your investments are there are to support you in a rainy day. So if your rainy day comes along sooner than your retirement, you may need to touch it. That's not a sin. It's okay. However, what matters next is what are you going to do to replenish it? And are you focusing on that?
So creating that plan.
Creating a plan, and more
Mhm.
importantly, knowing that we want to replenish it. And here's another thing that I find that women don't do very well, and that is focusing on making more money in an easy way. So they will look at things more difficult. I think an easy way, like one of the things that we're doing, and I really appreciate you for doing this, which is having collaborations. It's
Yeah.
an easy way, for women to get to know each other, to get to know what's out there in the world. And the other is advertising and marketing. So I wouldn't do that before. It was something that I shied away from.
Mm.
Honestly, I think it's more, again, a womanly thing. We don't want to, let's say, toot our own horn, so
Yep.
we shy away from it. And I feel that that is important. Ever since I started to do that, there's more money coming in. So when you have consistently more money coming in, then everything else becomes easier. So I feel like it's a multi-pronged approach, if you will. One, yes, of course, to make sure that even if you take money out, you want to make sure you're replenishing it and have a plan in mind. Okay, I took money out. Now what? How do I fill those coffers up again? You
Right.
know?
Right. Yeah,
Yeah, so that's what
exactly.
I would say.
Oh, that's a really good point too. And I really like that. I mean, the way that you make it all sound, it sounds less intimidating, I think. And I think that it is something that a lot of women are really uncomfortable discussing their finances, planning for finances, asking to be paid what they're worth at times. Money's a really tricky thing, I think, for women. And you even talked about, just being able to promote your own business. I've talked about this numerous times. We are taught as women to be humble, to be
Mm,
modest. There's a very different approach. If I'm going to speak about an award that I won, I'm using different language than a man would use, simply because if I use the same language as a man, it gets perceived completely differently. And we'd love to say that the world isn't like that, but it is. And so we as women need to find where our path is, where we can adjust that. But it doesn't mean that we shrink into the background and that we're not going to, sell our services, sell ourselves, sell all the things that we do. Because what I have learned about women is they tend to be what I call my passion driven entrepreneurs because
mhm.
their focus, and this is part of the challenge, their focus is not money. Most of the women that I coach will tell you that they love what they do so much they would do it for free.
Right. Trust me, I've heard that. That's why I'm laughing. This is
Yeah.
amazing.
And it's wonderful that's what we wanted. Like that's how much we love what we do because we're driven by passion. We're
Yeah.
not driven by money and the capitalism and all of that, and that's, I think, sort of almost a negative association that we have with money. But at the end of the day, I mean, I got bills to pay. I got cats to feed. I've got, there's things that just realistically need to get done. And so you need to pay me for my services. And my clients, of course, respect that. They understand that, I don't come cheap. I don't come inexpensively. But at the same time, I'm also always willing to, do what I can to ensure that it's comfortable for them in a way that feels like it's financially supporting them. And it's also an investment. You invest in my services, I'm going to make you more money. Like it's a win-win really at the end of the day. But it's still sometimes difficult. It's always getting that first payment from them that it's always just that, oh, but I might need this money. And I think that, making the right investments in your training, in your business, and into your financial freedom is so key. So
Yes.
where do they get the education for how do I learn about money? What's the best way for them to find that information?
Well, I could give you an easy answer, which is the internet. But of course, there's so much information
There's
there.
so much on the internet. Yes, I know.
Well, it depends where they're starting. Of course, that is the key, the backbone of what I do. I educate women. That's where I have come in. I realize this is the missing piece, and this is where it all begins. So that's my whole business now. I only
Okay.
educate women. But of course, there are books in the subjects, and watching YouTube videos. And I actually went to then a school where I learned personal finance, spent a lot of money on it, where they teach you. But there's a lot of places that you can learn. And I think that it's about just starting, start reading Rich Dad Poor
Right.
Dad, for example. That was my
Yeah.
first introduction into it. It's about the mindset, about how people think about money. So I think, yeah, there's plenty of places to get educated. There's plenty, really. It depends where they're starting.
And I mean, and you mentioned, yeah, you got trained in this. Like you have two master's degrees, if I'm not mistaken. Is that
Yes,
correct?
I do.
And one of them is in finance. What's the other one in? Sorry, I apologize. I don't remember offhand.
International, no, it's all right. International business. I was a nerd. I think I still am. In fact, it was so bad. I'd never thought I'd hear this. My mom was like, "Stop studying."
Stop. Yeah, but and I mean, and I think it's phenomenal though that you have that education, and that's an education that'll last you a lifetime because if there's one thing that I've learned, and I'm sure you could probably speak to this more, like I love that you're referencing Rich Dad Poor Dad. That's not a new book. That's not
No,
something that just came out, 6 months ago or anything. This is not a new book. I where I live, actually, David Chilton, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He wrote The Wealthy Barber, another financial book that talks about saving. He's a
yep.
Canadian, so and he actually lives in my city. So especially love him for that. But again, not a new book. And I actually reread it just a couple of years ago, I want to say, and someone's like, "Oh, like why are you reading that book? It's an old book." I'm like, because it's about money. And if there's one thing that has not changed in hundreds of years, it's money.
Right.
Like, sure, where you might put the money, like there's some things have changed about it, but the ultimate idea of saving your money, of protecting your finances, of prioritizing that is not a new concept.
It's not a new concept at all, but it is, however, very new to women. Jonathan, you might be
Mm,
really surprised to hear this, that it wasn't until the 1960s in the US that women were allowed to own a bank account with their own names.
yeah.
1960s.
It blows my mind. And even if you look back to, I mean, like my parents were married in 1972, and my mom has not had a bank account in her own name since then. They've got it's a shared account, don't get me wrong,
Right.
but she hasn't had anything that's just hers since 1972. And that's perfectly normal for her. And they've got a very healthy relationship, very healthy financial relationship as well. Like, that it works for them. But I've watched women who have been in these marriages for 30, 40, 50 years. They come out of it. They don't have two nickels to rub together essentially because they don't have their own financial freedom. And it's not something that they even know. My dad is actually my dad has MS, so he's disabled and he's always taking care of the finances and he can't anymore. So, and it's something that my mom's like, I don't want to take care of the finances. I didn't learn how to do that. I mean,
Right.
she's in her late 70s. It's the last thing she wants to do. So I've taken it over for her and I work with my dad on these things, but it's something she's so uncomfortable with, and I don't blame her. But in her case, she doesn't need to be more comfortable with it than she is. She's got resources and people, and the money is there, so it's not a big deal. But for someone else who's just starting over, potentially after, a long-term marriage where they didn't have their own finances, not only do they not have the finances, but now they're having to learn how to
Right.
build them and what all that looks like. And yeah, I mean, it's astounding to your point, they weren't even able to get their own bank account until the 1960s. A little bit different in Canada. We were sooner here, but nonetheless. So let's use that frame of mind because I think most people are in the US listening to this anyway. So 1960s, women finally get their own bank account. That doesn't mean that they started suddenly talking about money.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
it's not as though like that's okay. So we've got, what's that, 60 some years of having discussions about it. No, I mean, I would say it's only been in the last decade that I see women more comfortable talking about money. It's still not a super comfortable topic, but I'm seeing more women than last 10 years or so that are, you know, not afraid to share that they have money or that they don't have money, and what their situation is, and talking about it a bit more openly. Is that, are you saying would you say you find the same thing?
100%. It's why I switched my business. So I was predominantly doing men and women both before I had a baby. And when I had a baby, something shifted within me. I can't really put my finger on it, but I just realized that women have a completely different set of challenges. It's so different from men.
Mhm.
And I just felt like my heart said, you got to focus on women. And when I looked at my, latest clients, I heard all of them saying the same things. And I
Yeah.
said, goodness, I need to talk to this. And it's exactly what you're saying, Shauna Lynn, which is I don't feel comfortable talking about money. I don't feel comfortable asking for money. Now, that's a huge challenge since most of us here are entrepreneurs. And if we can't ask for money, we're doomed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually funny. I did a call, just sort of like a networking call with a woman a couple months back, and I'm a curious person. I ask a lot of questions. I'm constantly working with potential coaching clients and such. So I'm just accustomed to asking a lot of questions. And I asked her what her profitability plan was. I said, like, are you currently profitable, or if not, what's your profitability plan? And she was so offended. She said, no one would ever ask a man that question. And I said, oh, that's really interesting. And of course, her feelings are valid. Like,
Mhm.
at no point was I upset that she said this, but from the flip side of it, in my head, of course, I'm thinking this is actually a conversation I have with every person I speak with, not
Mhm.
because they're women necessarily, but yeah, also because they're women. Like, this is a conversation that we need to be having. But it was clear she was so uncomfortable with that conversation. I also understand. I mean, I'm technically a stranger. It's none of my business necessarily. And I even said to them, like, you don't have to share that if you're not comfortable with it. I get that. But it was the fact that she was offended that I even asked the question in the first place. And I thought that was really interesting because she keeps running up against this. And I also respect the fact that, she's looking at it from the perspective of, I am a woman who is thriving in the business, and I want to ensure that I'm protecting myself as a woman and not being taken advantage of or anything. But it was really interesting to me, just her whole mindset towards speaking about profitability. It sounds like she's had many conversations where it's been kind of similar along those lines. And I think it's a shame that we're not more comfortable speaking about it. And I'll admit, like, I have hangups about it too. Like, as much as we're having this conversation, I'm thinking in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, if someone asked me what my profitability plan is and I didn't know them, like, I might be a little bit like, none of your business. So yeah, I think so. How do we go about getting more comfortable just talking about money as well? I mean, like, again, I try to have this conversation. She gets offended. So, like, where do women go to speak about it? How do we start opening up this conversation more for women?
Wow, you've given me a great idea, Shauna Lynn. Like I'm thinking I need to build a community so people can talk about this. I was
Oh,
already feeling it, and I started to put up feelers in my community like, hey guys, girls, do you want a group like where you can come and talk about money? And everybody was like, yes, yes, yes. And I think that we need to create online spaces. That's what I'm thinking here, where
I
women
like
can come
that.
together and talk about money. And you're right, like women hesitate so much about talking about money. Speaking back into the point about that lady who was afraid to talk about profitability, it really made me sad to think that someone would feel that way because it represents a wound, like
Yeah,
of some old pain that's coming up. She feels like her worth is being determined by the money, or she worked really hard for it because she was worthless before. It's something related to that. It's not
yeah,
related
I
to
think you're right.
profitability. Because the first thing that I talk to with my male clients is profitability. We talk only money, and that's all they care about. They don't
Yeah.
give two hoots about anything else. They're just talking about numbers.
Right. It's so true. I mean, I've run numerous service businesses over the years, home staging, interior design, and anytime we give a quote, the women are going to read the details and what all's going into this. The men are going to go all the way to the bottom. I want to see the number. That's
Number,
all they
right?
care about. They might go up afterwards to see, like, okay, what all's included in this number, but they're going to scroll to the bottom and get to that number. It's the first thing they're going for. So it is kind of interesting how, yeah, we definitely have different perspectives, I think. Yeah.
Yes, we do. We 100% do. And yeah, I mean, as women, we need to get this thing together. So if someone's listening to this podcast, they've already taken one step to make it cool to talk about money. We just need to make it cool to talk about money. It's okay to talk about money. We all need money to eat food, to take care of our kids, to go on vacations, whatever it is, you need money. It's just it's so convoluted, the whole money conversation. I mean, talking back about when did women get introduced to money. It's not so long ago, and they don't know what to do with it. And who
Hmm.
knows, it might be, they always talk about things get passed on generations. Like if you look back many, many generations ago, maybe women were making money only by one means. You know what that is. And they probably don't like that. Maybe there's some old, ancient, connection between money being a bad thing. And women
Right.
don't make money. Men are supposed to provide. So perhaps it's that, but there's so much of like a whole mesh, like I see it as wires all intertwined, like metal wires. It's like this big jumble in women's minds when we talk about money. My sister always said that somehow I missed that that memo.
But it's true though. I mean, especially considering that, like you said, in your culture, you
Yeah.
encouraged to learn anything about money necessarily. I mean, like you even said, like your dad said, "Well, I'm providing for you," and I'm sure
Yes.
that was probably something that was challenging for him. That he's got this mindset as his role of provider,
Right.
and now you're saying, "But I want to go make my own money here, and I want to be
Yes.
financially free myself." And so I can imagine that you yourself have a difficult association from a young age as well. But you blew past that. Like you said, your sister said you don't really have that mindset, which is fantastic. And you started these money habits at a very young age. What would you say if you were to go back to your 20-year-old self? What kind of advice would you give yourself?
I would probably say do more of what you were doing. So I was putting aside money, but learn more. So I didn't make very
Mhm.
smart choices. I did lose a lot of money. I didn't talk about that yet. And I wish I hadn't lost it because I didn't have the education. So what I had done back then was that I hired, let's call them like an investment manager to invest my
Okay.
money because I didn't know anything about it. And so I gave my money to him. I had saved money for maybe 10 years by then. And he recommended I invest in a Chinese bond, and it was a good Chinese company at that time. And I didn't know anything about something that's called diversification, which is, you distribute your money. I thought it was a good idea because it was a good company, it was giving a good return. And I invested in it, and that company claimed bankruptcy, and I lost $100,000. That was
Oh,
all the money I
ouch.
had saved, all of it for 10 years. I was putting aside money. And that was such a big blow to me. I actually was thinking, can I sue him? But of course, banking documentation is rock solid, is all against you.
Sure.
And I couldn't do anything. And I was distraught. I remember being in a cab, just going to his office and thinking, what can I do? What can I do? And there was nothing I could do because the documentation says you make the final call. He made a recommendation, but I approved it, right? So
Right.
there's nothing we can do about it. And so I wish that I had not done that. That was a really painful lesson. I wish that I had learned sooner what personal finance is. However, I must say that was my catalyst. That's what then propelled me on this journey to say, I'm not going to depend on anybody to tell me what to do. I want to know what to do with my own money. Like that's the basic education I must have. I started to think I'm working like 10 years to make this money, and then I trusted somebody else with it. Why?
Right.
Why did I do that? Why did I not learn it myself? Of course, the schooling system never taught us anything. Nobody's teaching
Sure.
us this. So I realized that this is a big fundamental flaw. We go to school, we get educated for 20 years on average. We study a lot, like, two MBAs. So,
Right.
so you
Right.
study about like 20 years so that you can become valuable to society and make money, right? That's
Sure.
the
That's
that's
the
the whole
goal.
objective. That's the goal.
Mhm.
And then we go to work another 40 years working to make money. So we've
Right.
spent 60 years after money, either wanting to get trained to make money or working to make money.
Right.
And we have no clue what to do with the money.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, and I think, traditionally there was always, put your money in real estate, buy a house. And of course, that's, that market has changed significantly. It's much more difficult to get into the housing market in the first place. If you get out, good luck getting back in. There's a lot more surrounding that. And even, I mean, real estate isn't as predictable as it once was in terms of investment. Still not saying it's a bad investment by any means, but I remember it was years ago before I started doing my own investing. I will say that I did have that mindset of I'm not going to trust someone else to invest
Right.
my money and tell me where to put it because only I know what it is that I'm looking for. And so I did a fair bit of reading. I found a few different books
Mm.
for me because I'm in Canada. I wanted to be specific about the Canadian market. Tell me about the different types of funds in the Canadian market. What are some things that I want to take into consideration in terms of GICs versus mutual funds versus bonds, like all the different elements. And it is a lot. And, you see different TV commercials about who to invest with and how to invest. And, it's a lot of noise out there. So it can be difficult, I think, to find that information. And I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges that so many people face is just finding the information that they need in the first place. But it's a valuable lesson that you learned. And I do also want to say that, just a couple of episodes ago, I was talking about how I want to take failure out of this negative context that it's been in. It is not a bad F word. Failure is something that is a part of the process as an entrepreneur, as a human being. We learn from failure. So as much as I know you probably would like to have not lost $100,000, would like to have not been if a few $100,000 in debt, those are valuable lessons. And I will tell you this too. I attended a seminar. It was earlier this year. I attended a seminar. It was a local colleague of mine who's also an entrepreneur, and his business coach was hosting this seminar. I said, well, I know that this business coach has worked well for him, so I'm going to attend the seminar. And the business coach basically got up there and told us about how he started his business because his dad gave him a whole bunch of money to start the business. And so he hired these business coaches right out of the gate. And in the first year, they made $1 million. And I'm listening to the story and I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to hire you as my business coach. And whereas, you're telling the story about how you lost $100,000, how you got yourself out of hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. If you said you had $10,000 in debt and got yourself out of that, I'd be like, all right, that's impressive. But a few $100,000 in debt, that's a bigger story. I am more likely to trust you with my money than anybody else, because if anyone respects that dollar, it's the person who's lost it several times over and still managed to come out on top. That's the success story, and I've got a couple of my clients that are in some debt right now. And I just keep telling them, just remind yourself that you're writing your comeback story, because we all come back from these things, and you will come back from it because you've got the perseverance for it. So I appreciate your story of I love that you just shared that you lost all that money. I know, like I said, I know you probably wish you hadn't, but man, it really makes for a great story though too, and goes to your credibility. You're not just a couple of MBAs. You've got real life experience as well.
I appreciate that, Shauna Lynn. Thank you.
Yeah. So you've got a master class as well that, and I believe it's a free master class to help people to help women with building their own wealth and financial freedom. Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. So it's really talking to what we're really talking about right now, which
Perfect.
is women and their, challenge, their number one challenge with money. And it's related to what we spoke about. I won't give it away because then no one's going to watch it. So,
Right, fair enough.
The number one challenge with money, and really what are the steps that they need to take so that they can get out of whatever money situation they find themselves in, how to build a plan and how to move through it. So it's absolutely free. And I am very community minded. So kind of talking to what we were talking about earlier, I think it's very important to meet women where they are and serve them where they are. So this is if women are hesitating from increasing their prices. I always say have different prices for different people. Like if someone's
Agreed.
making more money, ask them to pay more money. And if someone's making less money, let them pay less money. The whole goal is to serve, right? And
Sure.
make money in the process. So
Sure.
so it's just, I want to do this free, and this is free. So people get that knowledge, at least let's say the foundation, so that they can start.
I love it. I'm going to actually check it out myself, because I think that there's, I've got a ton of clients, I'm sure, that I'm going to be sending it to enjoy it. So where do we get this masterclass?
Well, it's on my website. So it's cherylppinto.com/masterclass. Pretty simple.
Perfect. And I will throw that into the show notes as well. So if there's one takeaway that you can leave this audience with, this has been such a fantastic conversation. What is one takeaway? What's one action step that you want the people listening to this to take now?
2 words come to mind, and that's money matters.
I love that.
So make it matter, make it count, which means look at it and don't be afraid of money,
You really do make it sound and feel so simple. And I appreciate that because I feel like we're overcomplicating this, aren't we?
Yes, yes, so totally. Women are always overcomplicating it. And I always say it's not that bad. So there's a book by Sandra, and I forget her last name, and it's called Ask for It or Ask It. And it
Okay.
transformed the way that that I showed up around asking for money. I've also did an education at Harvard. I'm not showing off, but they asked us to read that there. It was about
Okay.
negotiation and it really helps. So it's just make money simple. It's not complicated. It's not scary. Once you get it, it's just numbers. It's like,
Right.
you go to the gym every day if you want to get fit. So when it comes to money, work at it every day if you want to
Yeah.
get money. That's it.
It's perfect. Yeah, that sounds so simple. And I'll find that book and we'll put it into the show notes as well for anyone
Yes.
who's interested in checking it out.
Sure.
Well, listen, Cheryl, it's been such an honor to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me. I so appreciate it.
I loved this conversation. I loved it. I haven't had somebody to talk to about this because usually it's me and my clients. So here, just having someone else to talk to about it who's had similar experiences is amazing. Like, thank you for this opportunity. I
Oh,
love being.
I appreciate it. I've got some great takeaways that I'm going to start implementing as well. It was some great reminders as well, which I very much appreciate. And like I said, I'll be sharing this with all of my clients too.
Sure, of
So
course.
thank
Thank
you. And so listen, if you're listening to this episode and this is resonating with you, I really encourage you to share this episode with another woman who you think can benefit from this conversation, because that is the best way not only to support our podcast, but also to support the powerful women in your life. So thank you so much for tuning in today. And I hope you'll tune in again next week and allow me to continue to be a part of your journey. Don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, everyone, keep thriving.